This is the Reason interview with Nick Gillespie, where I go deep with the artists, entrepreneurs, policymakers, and visionaries who are making the world a more libertarian, or at least a more interesting place, by challenging worn-out ideas and orthodoxies. My guests today are filmmaker Jon Shenk and former Navy SEAL Marcus Capone. Along with Bonni Cohen, Shenk is co-director of the new Netflix documentary In Waves and War, which follows 3 former Navy SEALs as they use psychedelic-assisted therapy to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injuries related to their service. Capone is one of the 3 main figures in the film. He first used the ultra-powerful substances Ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT in 2017, and he's the co-founder with his wife Amber of Vets, a nonprofit that helps veterans access psychedelic therapies. He's also CEO of Tara Mind, a company seeking to expand the use of psychedelic-assisted mental health therapies to all Americans. I talk with them about why so many veterans and everyday people could benefit from psychedelic therapy, and the challenges of depicting both the grim realities of war and the otherworldly experience of tripping on Ibogaine, which is called the Mount Everest of psychedelics. We also discuss why the Trump administration and an unlikely bipartisan group of legislators may well help usher in what some are calling a psychedelic renaissance. Here is the Reason interview with Jon Shenk and Marcus Capone of In Waves and War. Jon Shenk, Marcus Capone, thanks for talking to Reason.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
This is a remarkable film that will, that has 2 distinct halves to it, really, in a way. Part of it, I think, is a documentary or a story about war and the effects of war on the people who wage it, on the soldiers who fight it, and what happens to them when they come back. And then, these kind of bold, groundbreaking, potentially transformative therapies. And I want to talk about both about this. But let's first talk about the reality of war and how that affects people. Marcus, you are a former Navy SEAL. Did your attitudes towards battle change over time? Or did you get to a point where you were like, this is going to be my last mission because I'm either going to quit or I'm going to die doing what I'm doing?
Yeah, that's a good question, Nick. I loved doing what I did. I think the special operations community, specifically I could speak for the SEAL community, but many special operators, Green Berets, and if you want to put Rangers in there, and Delta and SEAL Team 6 and the like, very similar personalities, and I think we all sign up for similar reasons. We want to go overseas, and we want to use the training that we had to go after bad guys. I mean that's the bottom line. We never want to cause collateral damage. That's not in our mission. And I would say we're the best and brightest warfighters, and collateral damage we try to keep to a minimum. The idea is, let's take terrorists off the battlefield. Let's work with our brothers, and let's come home. And so when I signed up, it's really everything I wanted to do. And when the wars kicked off, in all honesty, guys like me wanted to go overseas and fight because that's what we trained to do. And even, throughout my careers, I did multiple combat tours. I never wanted to quit. I definitely got, I don't want to use the term scared, but as you see your friends, some of your friends getting wounded, many of your friends getting killed in action, you just realize that you're not Superman anymore and that it can happen to you. And when you have that shift in perspective, everything you do is a little bit different. You go, wow, we're human here. Initially, honestly, on my first deployment, I thought I was Superman. I can do anything I wanted. And I felt like as the deployments went on, I would get nervous sometimes putting my face in front of the door, wondering if, when I make entry into this room, is someone going to be sitting there, with a machine gun and pull the trigger? And so when you start working and that's what's going through your mind, it's there's a lot of anxiety there. I mean, there's a lot of nervousness. I talked to
the whole point, right, of SEAL training in particular, but I guess of special forces or combat forces, is that you have to be present in the moment and in your immediate area, right? Because if you're not, then you're definitely going to, something bad is going to happen.
Yeah, your focus is all there, right? And I think they call it like flow state. You train so much that you're really not thinking about it. You have to think at a macro level, maybe before you go on target. But like when you're in the moment, you're really reacting to what's going on very quickly. And you do have to be focused, and you kind of just flow through it. So you really don't have time to think about that. But it doesn't mean you're not nervous. It doesn't mean that you don't have anxiety. I talked to a master chief that I served with who I respect so much. And I just said, I was scared out there. Like I was actually scared. We got engaged. A couple of guys got hit. And we both were just talked about and said, yeah, but you know what courage is? It's actually being scared and going, okay, I still have to do my job. And still making entry, going into the rooms, clearing rooms, engaging people. And so, back to your initial question, I never really changed perspective of, I want to quit or do something else. But towards the end of my career, I just think the years took a bit of a toll on me. I had some TBIs. I went to some brain clinics. And
that's traumatic brain
injury. And really, I feel like life caught up, and maybe it was part of war. Maybe it was some stuff I experienced as a child that was initially a tailwind and became a headwind, and maybe it was some wartime quote unquote trauma. But there just came a point where it started feeling like a job and not feeling like I can do this for 20 hours a day and not feel like work.
It became a job, not a mission.
One thing I would add, Nick, just not that I have any military training or background, but we spent a lot of time with a really several former Navy SEALs and other special forces, and in the film you see this. Marcus signed up. He was literally in BUD/S training to become a SEAL when 9/11 happened. He was the first class to graduate after the towers came down. Prior to 9/11, serving as a SEAL or a special op, member of the military was a different gig. These special op pieces of the military they're almost like these, they were designed as kind of these like James Bond type of, small groups that would do a ton of intel and training and do these missions, and they were highly effective. And obviously their reputation is second to none. They became, after 9/11, they really became, the military leaned on them to do day-to-day work. We're talking, Marcus, what did you do? 300 missions a year?
You were always going out. So you're right. Yeah. It was like a specialized unit that would, pick and choose the right thing. Or if there was a hostage overseas, you'd get ready, you'd go over, maybe a mission here and there. But it was just a constant. You're just constant.
It was relentless.
Yeah, and I tell people, there's some people, well, I don't know, I'm fine. I served 20 years, and others, we've funded over 1,200 individuals that come through our program for treatment. You can't tell me that there's something not going on.
Right.
And I liken it as there are plenty of boxers that you never hear about that don't have any issues, but then there are plenty of boxers that have early stage CTE, and you go, well, how does that happen, or why does it happen? I don't know. It's individualized. Right. So the stuff that I struggled with doesn't mean the guy next to me is not having any issues, but then the guy on the left of him is having issues. And so we don't really know why. Maybe it's
it might just be the concussions, right, of being near massively loud explosions from ordnance or weaponry, right?
Yeah. So Nick, there was a study that came out. It's called operator syndrome, because it's very difficult to diagnose, and they don't think it's one thing. So it's some of the concussions from big booms, like you were talking about. It's some of the subconcussive blows that really a lot of the doctors are saying that's really what's going on. Subconcussive meaning you're not. It's not a concussion, it's subconcussive, but it's causing micro tears, micro scars in the brain. The micro scars you can't see, but the micro scars are like, bleeding out into your brain. And now all of a sudden, your hormones are out of balance. Your endocrine system is messed up. That's causing you to be depressed. It's causing you to have anxiety. So what's the label that we throw on it immediately? It must be PTSD. because it's so easy for a doctor to say, well, you have PTSD, you went to war. And so we're seeing now it is a host of things. It is some PTSD. It's probably some subconcussive blows, which a lot of the studies are showing what's going on from the wars. And then transition out from a team environment where you leaned heavily on your friends to you're by yourself in the corporate world. Right. You have nobody to lean on. Kind of it's like this, Amber, my wife, puts it perfectly. It's kind of like this perfect storm, and a person sometimes spirals and needs a tourniquet, right?
Jon, from a movie point of view, this is a documentary. It's not a narrative film, but any documentary about war and any documentary, particularly about Afghanistan and Iraq, the wars that have dominated this century for Americans, you step into something where there have been movies like American Sniper and The Hurt Locker, Lone Survivor, that simultaneously tell horrible stories, but also glamorize war. How does your documentary function to bring a level of reality of what war is, in a way that is, that is distinct? Because now that these wars are over, the same thing happened with Vietnam. It happened in a way with World War II, but fundamentally different because that was such a massive war. So many men served. I don't know that we ever processed, we didn't process a loss because we didn't lose, but we also didn't process the kind of strain on individual soldiers, even though it was everywhere around us. If I may, my father fought in World War II. He was in the Normandy campaign. And, it was years after he died, really, that I realized like him and all of my uncles clearly were, he had a Purple Heart. He fired weapons at the enemy in battle or something that's on his discharge papers. He was clearly I was going to say fucked up by it. He was clearly deeply affected by his service and never really talked about it or could talk about it. But, this movie, you're stepping into a conversation where even something like Hurt Locker, which shows somebody who cannot, get back into a civilian life, but it glamorizes it in a way. How do you bring this material like where you're treating the work that or the service done by people seriously, but also de-glamorizing it?
That's a great perspective, and thank you for sharing that story about your family. It reminded me in film school I saw a great documentary called Let There Be Light by John Huston, who documented what we used to call shell shock back in the World War II days. These things have always been with us as we've gone through these wars in American history. We used to call it shell shock. After Vietnam, we came up with this term PTSD.
Right. It used to be called battle fatigue. There was literally a movie with Lassie, the famous dog, where Lassie had battle fatigue.
Oh, right. Interesting.
Because she worked in the war. But
well, it's a great question. Take the movie Lone Survivor. Mm-hmm. Amazing movie. Peter Berg, a brilliant director. It's a lot of fun to watch, and it's based on this real life story that our film actually, in a way, kind of tells the sequel of, which is, Operation Red Wing, which happened in Afghanistan, I believe, in 2005.
Yes.
And this was a major moment in Navy SEAL history. It was at that time the largest loss of life in a single battle for the Navy SEALs. Marcus was in Europe at the time and was getting messages from his buddy Matty Roberts, who you see in the film, who was supposed to be on this helicopter that went down.
Well, I was actually we were getting messages from our wives. So I was getting messages from Amber.
Oh, right.
So here we are deployed.
Wow. Yeah.
And we're getting messages from the spouses that are home.
Right, which is such a funny, not a funny, but an ironic modern take, surreal
Guys,
kind of view.
I'm going to take my jacket off just because it is warm in this room.
Anyway.
And you want to flex a little bit.
I want to
get it.
Yes, there we go. I'm still working
Marcus,
out.
Whenever Marcus wants to put me in my place, he just takes off his sweater.
That's it, Jon.
An article of clothing. He's going to be naked by the end of this conversation.
That's a good way to keep your audience engaged.
There we go.
Anyways, in the film you see we go through this battle again, but we really try to tell it from a point of view of hyper realism and show not just the battle itself, but the after effects of what happens to the men who were there on the ground. And Maddie tells this story. We found out later it was the first time he had really talked about this since 2005 when he sat down for our interview to describe what he went through that day on Operation Red Wing. And Maddie says in the film, you carry your buddies' bodies, for, I don't know, I think it was a 24 or 36 hour period that recovery went on. You're never the same again. That's just a pure response to kind of a mental health moment. Maddie didn't have any physical problems that day, but he went through this thing where he had to go into the woods of Afghanistan and in the mountains and do the recovery from that disaster that happened. And then, of course, we show in the movie, we use this amazing animation that was done by Studio AK in London to recreate the aftermath of that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We as documentary filmmakers, we kind of have an allegiance to the truth, both what happened factually, but also what happened in the aftermath.
I'll point out too, some of the wartime movies done by people like John Huston and Frank Capra and John Ford, some of those were actually kept from the public afterwards because they were deemed too realistic, which, it goes into this whole question of how do you accurately kind of document what war is without glamorizing it or without making it impossible to ever raise an army again. Yeah. Because a lot of army training is to deal, or military training is to get people who know that they might be killed doing what they're doing, to show up for work every day.
Nick, I first want to say thank you about the World War II veterans. And my grandfather fought also in Northern Africa. And he was not a good person when he came home. And the stories from my dad. And when we all grew up thinking the angry uncle, the angry grandfather, why are they, like you just said, we now know why. None of those individuals had help. There was nothing really set up for them when they came back.
Well, there were parades, right? I mean, this is the dark version of it. You could go through the Canyon of Heroes in New York City or something, or have, people would greet you, when you came home for the first day, and then, you're on your own.
It is a reminder of just how far we've come. Obviously, we have a ways to go with treatment and understanding and trying to get better help for our vets. But man, when you look back to World War II, John Huston made that movie. It didn't see the light of day until decades later. At least the conversation is happening, and I when Bonni and I met Marcus and Amber and heard about their Marcus's own harrowing story and Amber's story with her family about what she went through, but then their call to action, once they found help to pull their brothers and sisters out of the trenches of a mental health crisis to try to find a solution, we were totally inspired.
Marcus, can I ask you, so you have an angry uncle who you're like, I don't really want to hang out with him, but then you're probably watching on, TV in the afternoons or, renting videos of movies about World War II, or even something like, Saving Private Ryan, which comes late in this, the World War II corpus. And you're like, oh yeah, that's horrible. But it's also like, that is unbelievably exciting. Like, who doesn't want to, land at Normandy and survive? Did those visions of, glamorized war help put you in a place where you wanted to be, not just in the military, but in the SEALs?
I mean, I think movies are made for people to watch. And I think even if individuals don't like that, when there's excitement on the TV, you're like, oh, this is pretty cool, right? When Netflix comes up with a series of I'm just going to make this up, like a modern day 007, Mission Impossible, right? You're like, wow, that's cool stuff. He's jumping out of airplanes and et cetera. So there's a part of it, I think, that has to be done because, Hollywood's, you're trying to make a movie and have people watch it. What got me interested in the SEAL teams was there was a Discovery Channel special showing individuals going through training. And here's where it's like, I think it gets a little dark for individuals who like to go in this side of work. There was nothing fun in terms of other people looking at it and going, oh, well, that's really fun. I mean, you got guys that are like practically drowning, guys that are literally shivering uncontrollably, look like they're miserable. And guys like me are like, wow, that's cool. Like, I want to sign up for that.
Yeah.
And you're like, what is wrong with you? Like, how is that cool?
Well, they know it's going to be a small number of people drawn to it, and then an even smaller number that do the training. But yeah, in part of the movie, I think you guys show something like that. And then I was thinking there's a scene in Officer and a Gentleman, which is, it's a very romantic movie. And it's interesting that there's really actually no battle scenes in it, but it's about becoming a Navy pilot. Yeah, yeah. And there's a scene where David Caruso, who was not a star at the time, but would later have a bigger career, he almost drowns in one of the training, then he washes out. And, and you're like, I definitely don't want to be that guy. I guess everybody wants to be Richard Gere on some level.
Right.
But it's weird. Can I ask, does, part of the thing about World War II, besides, just a mass mobilization of almost all of the world was involved in, and certainly every aspect of American life was transformed to be part of the war effort. You couldn't get silk or nylon stockings. You couldn't get tires. Car companies stopped building new cars because they were building tanks and Jeeps and things. And then the guys won and they get to come home in a place like Afghanistan. As it was unfolding, it seems like there's a sense that you're losing the war, or same thing, you don't really know what the point is. Like you have this, you might know what your individual mission is, but not what, am I working to beat the Nazis who are going to take over the world, or am I in this middle of nowhere doing something that I may or may not live or die, but it just doesn't really matter in the big scheme of things. Is that something that you think adds to a lot of vets' trauma or, problems kind of processing what they were doing?
Absolutely. And I'll just tell you, when we pulled out of Afghanistan and on the last day, obviously we lost a bunch of Marines and it was terrible. Then we pulled out. There was many individuals that I knew that went into these severe kind of PTSD moments and literally said, WTF?
What did we do that for?
What the heck was I over there for fighting? I lost friends. I was a commander of this unit, and all those things happened. And I heard all of them happen. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it because this is real. This is not a political thing. This is real, right? These are guys that were really good war fighters, really good officers, really good enlisted guys that just said, what? How can we do it just like that, right? And again, I don't want to get political here, but I'm just telling you the fact of the conversations I had with people I looked up to, and people were not good after that.
And was it partly, part of it might have been, the images, because everything now is heavily mediated through images. But, when you see people, this is also in Vietnam, the last chapter out of Saigon or something, but literally people falling off of planes, trying to hold on to get out. And there are a series of deaths of American soldiers. It's it was poorly done, in the moment. But was it, is it that plus, okay, then what were we fighting for?
I definitely think it's both, because you hear both. And we used to talk about this sometimes on deployment. If you think too much politically what's going on, Nick, it's kind of detrimental to the mission that you're trying to do. It's hey, tonight we're going after, I'll make up, terrorist bad guy from ISIS, whatever. And really, we know this individual is not a good person, and that's what we have to think about. If I start thinking about, what the Democrats and Republicans are talking about and what's going on here, you can't do your mission. And ironically, I read a Bible verse the other day literally talked about that. It was like, hey, if I start thinking about the politics of what's happening and not keeping my front sight focus on what's actually important for me to keep me alive and my friends alive so I could come home and see my wife and kids, then I've already lost, right? Because what I'm doing in Nuristan province and what's going on in Helmand, I don't know if I can control, probably can't control that, right? And that's the whole thing about letting go of certain things. Like, you can't control a bunch of things. So I'm just going to focus on my mission, again, with as little collateral damage as I can prevent.
Yeah, and I think that kind of in the American history of war, I think we as a society learned from the Vietnam experience that we don't blame the troops for the mistakes of policymakers. And Marcus and his buddies that went off and volunteered after 9/11 were doing it for earnest reasons. They loved the job. They wanted to defend the country. All that stuff is there. You see it in the film and the way the guys talk about it. As a filmmaker, we'd done a little bit of work with the military, but this was our first major documentary where it was all about military vets. And we learned early on, you don't blame the individuals for whatever systemic problems we might have in our politics or, whether the mission is, well-intended or misguided or whatever. These guys stood up and said, we're here to do it. We love this work. And then when they got done, the military didn't have the tools to treat these maladies that were happening.
Just to kind of dilate on that a bit, I guess this is the distinction, in a kind of literary sense between World War I and World War II. World War I, was one of the birth of the modern narrative of why are we fighting? There's the platoon that is in an isolated advanced position or something, and they realize they are fighting a war that is meaningless ultimately, and the politics creeps in and the meaninglessness of it to the detriment. In something like All Quiet on the Western Front or Henri Barbusse's Under Fire, and that is, it's interesting that we tend to look at, for obvious reasons, Afghanistan and Iraq through the lens of Vietnam or maybe World War II stories, but probably going back to World War I and the soldier experience there might be more helpful. Jon, I wanted to ask, before we talk about the psychedelic-assisted therapy part of the movie, which is also incredibly fascinating. This is not your first foray into Afghanistan War or Afghanistan as a documentarian, and you did it was Oscar nominated, right? A short, or no, I'm sorry, that was the homelessness one. But you did a film about people, Afghans trying to generate democracy in Afghanistan. How is this film kind of a coda to that, or how is it related to your earlier work?
Wow, thank you for doing that research. It's funny, Marcus and I have talked about this a couple of times. My wife and filmmaking partner, Bonni Cohen, and I spent some time in Afghanistan, 2003, 2004, in the early days when it was actually, there was, if you can wind back the clock 20 years, it was hopeful time. When Marcus was first deploying, this was a moment actually where we thought we could, bring some order to the chaos that was going over there under this terrible regime of the Taliban in Afghanistan. And we had the assignment to go over there and document kind of the democracy process. They were writing a constitution. We were in Afghan villages, following the shuras, the kind of wise elders who were trying to figure out how they would have some type of federal system where you'd have local power shared with a federal system. It was really exciting moments. Of course, unfortunately, that all unwound. This film, to answer your question, that film was, having that experience of being there was certainly informative. We really think about this film in many ways as our continuation of some of the work we've done in the quote unquote trauma space. We made a film called Athlete A about the scandal at USA Gymnastics, where the system allowed these young athletes to be abused for years and years and years. We think that it's not a perfect metaphor, but what's going on right now with American veterans is a little bit of a failure of a system, of healthcare.
I think it's a lot. I mean, to be quite honest, not a little bit, but a system that puts them over there, and then a system that does not provide for them when they come back.
100%. And these guys, because they're Navy SEALs and they have this mindset of like, well, let's just figure out how to get this done, regardless of what the system is doing.
It's known too, Nick. So when I went and trained with the Israeli SEALs for a bit, and great individuals, and they just said, Marcus, we have to be frank with you. Like, your training is great. Your gear is great. Like, you have a ton of money. Like, everything that has to do with like war fighting is good. Like, you guys do that right. They go, when you guys are done, your country does a terrible job of taking care of you. Because I was so impressed over there of how the Israelis loved their country, like just in general, because everybody does some type of public service. Even they don't have to serve in the military, but they go work in the hospital. So they feel what it's like to give back and be servant leaders. And so I was talking to women and men and all types of cafes, people who work there. They just had this crazy love for their country. And they just said, you guys don't take care of your soldiers when you're done. It's crazy. They're like, here, it's built into the system. So like when we serve, if we serve in the military, there's like this whole thing set up like really well for them to come back and unwind and get mental health treatment if they need it, and get private sector jobs and school. Like, it's just a better system that they said is much better than what we have here. And so it was interesting hearing it from somebody else, right?
I do want to point out, as a good libertarian, I hate the idea of compulsory national service. I think it's akin to slavery, but your point is well taken that, in Israel and in other countries, they actually, they honor the service that they force on veterans, whether it's voluntary or not, with actual aftercare. And I think that's a good segue into talking about the the treatment that that gets documented in the film. And I want to talk a lot about that, and I especially want to talk about the visualizations, Jon, in a second. But because they're tremendous. I think from a film history point of view, these are some of the most evocative psychedelic scenes that I've seen, and I look for that everywhere I can. But Marcus, in 2017, you went to a clinic in Mexico for Ibogaine treatment. Can you explain what brought you to, doing Ibogaine and what Ibogaine is, and why this is like, this isn't going to a silent retreat for a month. This is not even taking a heroic dose of LSD. This is like, I'm out of options, and I got to do something really.
The Mount Everest of psychedelics.
Mount Everest. We call it the nuclear option.
So how did you come to know that you that there's places in Mexico that are doing this?
Yeah, or this is the right drug. So first off, and I think the last time we spoke, I didn't know anything about this. So if you would have told me, hey, you're going to go do LSD in Mexico and it's going to help you, I would have just said, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do to get better. So at that time, I didn't really understand that there's a difference in psychedelics. There's just like everything else. There's medicines for different receptors. Ibogaine was the drug of choice because an individual that I knew had a very similar struggle post-military, and literally did a 180, and life was so good compared to where this individual was at. I just saw the change in that person. And for me, it didn't matter if it was Ibogaine, or you could have said, he ate a pound of ham every day for a year and got better. That's all I cared about, was that this individual got better. And it was this drug called Ibogaine, which I thought was crazy at the time. And I think I told you that. I didn't understand psychedelics. I grew up going to all-boys Catholic school in New York, and my parents were hippies and went to Woodstock, and they're amazing.
The secret there is, is that the Eucharist, the communion wafer, is LSD. Okay, that's the way to process it through Catholic theology.
That's right.
And Timothy Leary, who was going to be a priest for a while, never mind. That's a side.
It's okay.
But this is beyond exotic for you. This is beyond conceptualization that there are drugs, psychedelic drugs, that are going to make you better.
they were just recreational, right? In my mind, these are all recreational drugs. How can you come to me and say, this medical treatment is going to save your life, it's going to save your family, you're going to go on to start a global movement? Like, I would say, you are absolutely, what are you talking about? So that's where I was. But you see someone get better, and then you start doing research, and you do your homework, and like everything else, this is an education campaign that we've been on, right? Knowledge is power, and the more knowledge you had, you realize, okay, these have been utilized for thousands of years in certain cultures. I don't think you've ever heard about them being abused in these cultures. You've always heard about them for rites of passage. When you get to a certain age, it's like this growth, this spiritual connection that you get through psychedelics, stomach ailments, detoxifying, like all these things. That's when I started going, like now it's starting to make sense. But
by the way, they often come from plants that grow literally in the wild.
Somebody put them there.
Yeah.
Something. And I got more comfortable with it, but I still had struggled, Nick, with you're going to go do this thing, and in about 24 or 48 hours, you're probably going to be better. I'm like, I've been trying this for the last 7 years. I've been taking the pills. I've been taking the antidepressants. I've been going to the brain clinics. My SPECT scan was not good. I had a bunch of lesions on my brain, so there's obviously some stuff going on there. And you're going to take this plant, and your life is going to be good. So I was reluctant. Literally going out the door, Nick, I turned to Amber and I said, don't think that I'm going to come back this weekend any better than I'm going out the door. Yeah. And laughed.
Could you also talk for a second about her role in all of this? And this is actually a huge part of the movie, of the documentary, as well as the movement that you're part of, Marcus, is the way that wives or spouses, partners of people who have served have really, they bear a lot of the burden of this, but they also seem to be, really people who are facilitating, the growth and health of people like yourself.
If my wife, Bonni, were here, by the way, she would applaud that, and so do I. One of the takeaways from this movie is that the real heroes are the wives. You see Amber Capone and Patsy Shipley literally pull DJ and Marcus up, and push them towards this treatment because they felt like this was kind of the last straw, and it's a beautiful thing to watch in the film. And anyways, don't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to say that shout out to the wives.
I'm talking too much, so please, thank you for that. No, they're the silent warriors. They're the silent heroes. The reason they do it is there's true love there. Like, they really care. They really want to be together. There's something that we have shown them over the years that we're the person for them, right? There's real love happening there. And it goes the other way too. Some people are like, screw this, like get out. Like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. There's no bond there. But when you meet your spouse, Amber and I met at an extremely early age. Like, I've been on the road now 4 days. Like, I can't wait to see her. Like, I can't stand being away from her. We've just always had this bond. And that's why she's like, I'll do anything. She should have got rid of me a long time ago. And she stuck by my side because I don't know. She had, it was for her, it was faith. And she's hard-headed and she's loyal. And you know what? She was right. Like, I came out the other side and we are closer than ever. And the spouses and the children at home are really like kind of the unsung heroes. They're the ones that are cleaning up all the garbage that we are destroying many times. So
no, and one of the most remarkable and moving parts of the documentary are the way that your son talks about how you changed. Which is amazing. Like to just to have a different father. After this Ibogaine treatment.
Yeah, Nick, what did you think of that? Seeing Caden, because he's such a innocent, sweet, amazing individual, and I still have trouble here sometimes thinking like I didn't really have any PTSD or anything going on. I was okay, but everybody else knew I really wasn't okay. But when you see your son, you see your daughter, dad is dead, and then dad comes back and he's alive. like maybe I should take care of myself, and Amber takes care of herself and Maggie takes care of herself. And all of a sudden we had this fragmented family unit. It wasn't even a unit. It was just, we were, related to now this bond that will never break.
I remember when I said to Amber and Marcus, do you think Caden would be, interested in doing an interview for the film? Because it just seems like that perspective would be so important to get on film. And you guys came back to me and you said you talked to him and he'd be interested. And it was such an amazing experience spending that afternoon with him. He's such a deep guy. He really just kind of let it all hang out. And I hope that it was useful for him as well. You really see him go through something telling those stories.
This is real. I mean, I feel like this is as real as you can get. And how do you? Yeah, sorry, Nick.
I was just going to say, explain. You show the Ibogaine treatment, and Ibogaine is derived from the bark of an African tree. It's considered, John, as you said, the Mount Everest of psychedelics. Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas and Secretary of Interior,
Energy.
Energy, thank you, for Donald Trump, has become an advocate and an apostle of, activist for Ibogaine, and talks about it as a total brain reset. Can you just quickly kind of summarize what did it feel like while you were on Ibogaine? Yeah,
it's without being an MD, PhD, It's working on the neurobiology, right? The neurochemistry, the brain, the connections, the electricity, the synapses. You actually feel like it's healing your brain. Like some of the facilitators down there, they joke when you're on Ibogaine, when they talk about it, they're like, you could feel like the little machines like in your brain actually healing itself. I mean, when you're on Ibogaine, your senses are so heightened. They say like 400 or 500%, all your senses, so you can smell that much better. You can hear everything. You can taste. The feel, what you can feel is unbelievable. So you can feel your heartbeat maybe a little bit. When you're on Ibogaine, you literally can feel every cell in your body. And I mean that, not like you could actually feel it yourself.
Is that not terrifying on some level?
On some levels, it absolutely is, because you can become a little paranoid and think there's something wrong with you. Like, wait, am I going into cardiac arrest? My heart's hurting a little bit. Right.
And you are, you're under medical care while you're doing this in case you do go into cardiac arrest.
Exactly. You're actually multiple times a day. You're doing your vitals. You do blood work. You do your analysis. You do EKG. You're hooked up to a heart monitor. There's nurses there. There's doctors there, 24/7. You feel so safe. But back to the brain. What I was talking about with this, your heightened senses. You feel the blood flow in your brain. Like you feel like it's getting massaged, and that's so weird to say or think about, but it actually feels like it's like, hey, we're making you better, right? We're fixing the parts of your brain that may have some lesions. When I say lesions on these scans, a beautiful brain in these scans, you'll just see like this brain, and then the lesions will look like on the pictures, it'll look like there's like these little holes, but all the holes is the way to tell you like, hey, there's no communication here, there's no blood flow here. It's working on those areas, so you feel like, yes, it feels like it's massaging your brain and it's turning it on again. And that's why when Amber went to Stanford and Dr. Nolan Williams, she's like, hey, I'm married to my husband. I'm around these guys. These guys wanted to do what they wanted to do. I'm not seeing a whole lot of PTSD. I'm seeing like their cognitive functioning debilitating. Like Marcus is like not able to do things correctly. And I see his friends the same way. I'm not seeing like a car backfire and him jump under the ground. This is a cognitive thing. And Dr. Williams from Stanford said, yeah, I know a little bit about this. Like, I think it is a brain thing. The operator syndrome we talked about shows it's a brain thing. And so something like Ibogaine, which have these neuroregenerative properties, it's really powerful for people that have TBIs and things wrong with the brain. So,
yeah, Jon, could you talk a little bit about the Stanford study that kind of bookends the movie? Because this movie, I mean, it deals with, Navy SEALs who have gone through Ibogaine treatment and have recovered, emotional and kind of mental functioning. But you start the movie with a bunch, with a study that is much more broad-based and much more kind of in the civilian population.
At the beginning of the movie, the first thing you see is kind of a medley of, I don't know, about a dozen guys talking about their symptoms of everything that Marcus is talking about: operator syndrome, the depression, the anxiety, the suicidality, the physical and mental anguish. And we kind of come back to those guys as a Greek chorus throughout the film, and then you see them after treatment at the end of the film. That is the cohort of special operation veterans that went through what we call the Stanford study, really the first ever real observational study of the effects of Ibogaine. And Stanford wasn't giving these guys Ibogaine. They were doing a battery of tests on them prior to going down to Mexico. And then a week after treatment, a month, 6 months later, a year later, these guys came back and redid all those tests. And that's how we know, this study that was published in the journal Nature documented this. That's how we know that there's something going on with Ibogaine. We need more study, and thankfully there will be more study soon. But yeah, the one thing we've had the opportunity in the film to document not just what was going on personally in the stories of our main character, so to speak, but to follow this real scientific study with a lot of rigorous follow-up about what was going on specifically with Ibogaine.
So, there's kind of a hardware dimension to all of this, like if the brain is a computer, and these are terrible, inapt metaphors, but if the brain is a computer and part of the hard drive just isn't working anymore, Ibogaine can help bring it back, or it's like swapping in new hardware. But then there's also the kind of software, and one of the things which has to do with the memories of trauma, during wartime and whatnot. And one of your characters, or one of the main people figured in the movie, DJ, what was fascinating is that when he was on Ibogaine, the scenes of psychological trauma that he went back to were not about being a SEAL in Afghanistan or in Iraq, but it was actually about his childhood. What's the lesson that we learned from something like that? Because that was obviously unexpected. And Marcus, you also talk about that too, that your the some of the issues that you were dealing with clearly predate your military service.
Yeah, we got to get really good at answering this question.
I know.
I feel like everybody is
it's a really, I'm really glad you zeroed in on that
because it's real.
Bonni and I first met Marcus and Amber. One of the first things we did is we went down to Coronado Island, where one of the Navy SEAL bases is, and we met, I don't know, over the course of a few days, out of 15 or 20 retired SEALs. Everybody had been through the Ibogaine treatment. Guy after guy told us about their experience with Ibogaine, and the hallmark of the experience is this, what they call a life review, a highly visual experience that goes on for 6-10 hours. Many people said it was like a slideshow or a film projector coming on, or like those Minority Report computers where you could kind of control scenes from your life. They were there in the present tense. In other words, Marcus Capone he takes to Ibogaine, he lays down, and he starts to take a tour, and he feels that he is still Marcus Capone, in 2017. But he's able to go back and view images from his life. Marcus called it a deck of cards, and all these images are fluttering by, and he could grab a hold of one and kind of look at it. And then the magic happens, which is that they're able to get this kind of psychological perspective on something that happened to them earlier in life and feel kind of like some healthy distance from it. And what I'm describing is a highly visual kind of filmmaking thing, right? That sounds very exciting as a kind of a storyboard to a filmmaker. But also from a psychotherapy point of view, to get that kind of insight and perspective in a few hours about your own life, about your parents, about your service in the military, whatever it is pretty powerful experience. Forget about all the other benefits of Ibogaine that hopefully we're going to learn more and more about. Just that psychological, emotional experience, to have that perspective shift, is quite powerful and felt like worthy of a movie in and of itself.
Yeah, and obviously in other forms of psychedelic-assisted therapy, whether it's with ketamine or MDMA or psilocybin or LSD, you get a similar description. It's not usually as intense as the Ibogaine. But there's also, Marcus, and you stress this, and people in the psychedelic-assisted therapy space always stress this, the Ibogaine is important. And, like people who do MDMA therapy will say something, often say things like, it was 10 years of therapy, in an afternoon.
Very real.
But the really important thing is the therapy, right? So if we just started giving people Ibogaine, and that was the end, that might help, but it would not be the best way of doing this, right?
I agree with you, Nick. There's definitely like two trains of thought out there in the psychedelic community, in the medical community, that the drug developers, I think specifically, but maybe that's a bit biased, right? Because here they are developing a drug and they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars. So they're saying, no, it's just a drug. Just get the drug through the FDA. I don't care about the therapy. I was on stage with a chief medical officer who's like, yeah, therapy is like voodoo stuff. And then you have the other side saying, wait a minute, that's bullshit. You take the drug does about 10% of the work. It's the catalyst, but it's all the integration after. I work with a coach still, and the work that we're doing, the insights I'm gaining from him when he hears me talk about my experience, it's just like every time I come out, it's just like these growth that you just don't get if you just take the drug and expect it to work. Now, when I took Ibogaine for the first time, Nick, I did feel like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders pretty quickly.
Yeah, you said it's like 10,000 pounds.
It was just like almost immediate relief.
Mm-hmm.
But the work we put in afterwards, I just felt like I just kept improving week over week, month over month, because there was so much to unpack. Who can unpack years of crap in a few hours? Right? So I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you.
Jon, can you talk about the visualizations? And this is the promise and the curse of any movie, whether it's a documentary or or a novel for that matter, or a narrative movie. Okay, we're going to have trippy scenes, right? Because things get weird on psychedelics.
Yeah.
The way that the animations and the visualizations, and there's some of that door stuff. Have you done psychedelics or? There is something, whether or maybe Bonni did or something. There is something very, recognizable in those scenes. And I've done a fair amount of psychedelics in different contexts, and it really, I almost think watching that movie, like you don't even need to do psychedelics in a way, because when you talk about the therapeutic idea of seeing your life come before you, and we've all seen, A Christmas Carol or something, right? There's always scenes of movies where people are watching earlier selves. But, where did that come from and how did you achieve that effect? Because it's quite striking.
Well, thank you, Nick. Earlier I was talking about when we were doing research, we heard these stories of these kind of, film movies and slideshows. Bonni and I really wanted to get this right. It was actually quite exciting to us as filmmakers to think about how the heck are we going to put that on screen, right? Obviously, we can't put a camera inside somebody's brain. I've dabbled a little bit. I am not a psychonaut. I certainly have not done Ibogaine. I'm very curious about it, but I haven't had the opportunity. This really came from listening to these guys. And, I think you're absolutely right. Psychedelics, one of the things that's happened in kind of culture is that we've done them a disservice in how we talk about them in movies. Oftentimes you see these sort of wavy pictures and blurry vision. And it's just, from what I can tell, having talked to people and dabbled a little bit myself, it's really not like that. It's actually, in some ways, kind of the opposite of that. There's sort of this hyper reality that people feel. Marcus was talking about feeling every cell in his body, and kind of Maddie talks about feeling connected to everything, which is a common feeling. Yeah. We really wanted to make, we had this idea, which is to create this animation that was an amalgam of the guys themselves. We took 3D scans of everybody so that the guys who appear in their own hallucinations are them. And then we took material from their lives. In Marcus's case, we scanned thousands of photographs and videos so that when he's flying through these cards of images, that's actually documentary stuff from his life. That's, I think, partly why it feels so real as a psychedelic experience, is that that's what happens, right? When you take these drugs,
specific.
You're in your own world, right? You have a different relationship to your own memories, and that's what we tried to put on screen. I have to shout out Studio AKA from London, who sat down at the table with us, rolled up their sleeves and said, okay, let's throw everything we know about visualizing psychedelics away and really think about how we're going to individualize these little movies about their experiences and put it on screen. And you're not the first person that's responded that way. I feel like the earnest work that we did, but also collaborating with Marcus and DJ and Maddie and these animators, somehow some magic happened, and we were able to figure out a way to put that on screen, and we're very proud of it.
Oh, it's mission accomplished there. For sure, in terms of just opening up a new way of visualizing things. Let's, in the time we have left, can we talk about what happens next? I mean, I like I said, I'm a good libertarian. I like free trade and I like open borders, but it killed me, Marcus, that you, and to this day, and I've talked to people of other groups, it kills me that you got to go to Mexico for this kind of treatment. We have really good hospitals here. We have a lot of doctors. We have obviously many programs at places like Johns Hopkins, NYU, Stanford that are doing work on this. Right now, psychedelic-assisted therapy is in the news. The MDMA-assisted therapy that was being tested by MAPS, a psychedelic group, got shot down by the FDA. There are a couple of other things in transit. But are you optimistic on the policy front, that psychedelic-assisted therapy or legalized psychedelics are going to become a reality in the near term?
I believe so. I mean, I believe that there's a way to do it, to get it done the right way and get it done the fastest. And I think, and it's the reason why vets and even my company Tar Mind, why we've stayed on this path of FDA approval, let's get it in the system, because not to be a hypocrite, if people are going to need to get treated, they're going to go outside the country, they're going to find ways to get better. And I just know that's going to happen. But how do we do it in a way to reach the most people that need this? And how do we pay for it? Because that's the problem. That's where I struggle with, Nick, with Oregon and Colorado, is they were first to market and they ran fast, but they still haven't figured out a way to subsidize people who can't afford those treatments. And that's where I get a little frustrated, because when we built Vets, someone paid for my treatment because I couldn't afford it. Right. Someone paid for me.
And Vets is your group.
Vets is our nonprofit where we fund individuals to go outside the country where we shouldn't to go do this. That's all Amber and I want to do, is let's raise money so we can pay for other people, so we can subsidize other people to do this because we know they can't. So that's why I always get not stuck, but we have to make this affordable, right? So the FDA route, we believe, is the way to do it, because that's how I reach thousands of people or millions of people. Now, the other side of that is, do we just open it up for everyone? And I struggle with that one, because I think it can go sideways. And then if that goes sideways, then we don't have, then the powers to be are going to step in and be like, stop. Nixon, 1970, we're just going to shut this down again. And that's what we don't want. So it's hey, let's just keep doing what we're doing. We have so much momentum. The administration, both sides of the aisle, could agree upon healing people. They're for psychedelic treatments. On the other side of that, I have a little bit of your libertarian perspective of dude, if you're doing something in your house, it's not affecting me. Why the heck do I care? You bring that out and you start hurting somebody else, okay, now you're going down.
Perhaps the libertarian in me coming out as well. I mentioned earlier, we have to remind ourselves many of these substances are naturally occurring things.
Right.
We've had government laws that have kind of put a barrier between us and the plants that we might need to help our health. And Nolan Williams always tells a story that when back in the day when we first started sailing ships around the world and we didn't have oranges and lemons on board, scurvy happened. And we solved that problem real quick, right? By science figuring out that you just feed these people oranges and lemons. In some ways, that's what's going on here. We've taken, we've kind of created this artificial wall between humanity and what nature has to offer. But of course, it gets more complicated when you think about the therapeutic aspect of this and how this you need guidelines and you need assistance to do these things. These are not drugs that we recommend that people just start taking on their own.
Right.
I think Michael Pollan really writes beautifully about how much you need to kind of think about the intentions going into this and then the therapy afterwards.
Right. Do you feel confident that, the VA, I mean, to come back to this, question that hangs over a lot of things related to, veterans, the VA has a terrible reputation for providing care. It just has been a dysfunctional organization for a long time. But it's also, it seems, there are many people in the VA and associated with the VA who are like, look, we are, when we open our drug cabinet, there's nothing there that's working. This stuff is working. The Trump administration, and I don't think you can conceive, even if you were on 1,000 milligrams of Ibogaine, you could not conceive of a person less psychedelic than Donald Trump, right? I mean, he is the anti-psychedelic, but he's spoken in favor of these things. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the HHS secretary, has talked about legalizing or decriminalizing or descheduling psychedelics. The VA is talking about this. Is this, this would be a very psychedelic thing to happen, right? That Donald Trump becomes the one who says, okay, you can take, psychedelics or something. But is anything happening in the VA that is imminent to kind of force the government at least to give it to veterans, if not, bring it to wider audiences?
Yeah, it's happening, Nick, slowly. So there are several studies going on through the VA. They're quiet. Amber and I worked on some bills with Representative Crenshaw and Representative Luttrell to release some money. So there's like $5 million here going, I believe, to Walter Reed, Dr. Aaron Wolfgang, who's the chief of psychiatry there. So he's got $5 million to work on an MDMA study. Again, these are actually not veterans, this is active duty. And then I believe $5 million is going to Emory University, the researcher down there. Yep. And then the VA also. Dr. Lynette Averill dosed, I believe, 7 veterans now within the last 2 years or year for the psilocybin research that is happening in Texas. So it's happening slowly, Nick. So I'm optimistic. I have to be optimistic. I mean, Joe Dispenza says you better be positive and optimistic for things to happen. So, I want this to happen like you, John. We all want this to happen.
Right. I mean, we need the fierce urgency of now, right?
We do.
We do. Yeah. And hopefully In Waves and War will be part of that. It's showing, I think by the time this airs, it'll be on Netflix. John, you and your partner Bonni Cohen, the co-directors of this, what do you hope happens once this movie is seen by hopefully hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people?
Yeah, we're proud to be on Netflix on Monday, November 3rd is our launch date. From a kind of an activist-y policy point of view, I really do believe that the movie is part of kind of a zeitgeist of activity, including this podcast, that I think where people are just clearly interested in learning more about these natural medications. There's just no question it's happening. I think Upton Sinclair said, things take much longer than you think they'll take, but once they happen, it happens much faster than you thought it ever could. I think we're at that fulcrum moment now where we could see some major turning points on this. The Texas legislature just funded $50 million with a matching potential of private money.
isn't that amazing? I mean, Texas has not legalized weed yet.
Yeah.
But they are, pushing forward on this, which just shows that we're in some kind of new space where, things aren't following the old logic.
No. Things are the news is out. The cat is out of the bag on this, and people are interested in it. And I think some of the old, bias against these medications is dying out, and we're seeing new interests, especially because of this veteran use case. Yeah. We also hope that people watch this film as a film, Mark. I think it's about psychedelics, it's about the military, but it's also about, I think, our shared humanity. I think there's something kind of deep going on in the message of this film. I want people to bring to it whatever they bring to it, but we've shown it to all kinds of audiences, veterans and non-veterans and people of all sorts all around the world. It's been making the rounds in film festivals for the past year. And Bonni and I are constantly surprised how people are moved by this film and find a connection in it. I think because it's about kind of laying down the barriers that we have against connections with our fellow human beings and with the natural world, and kind of remembering that we all have this kind of profound connection to one another, which is kind of an anathema. Maybe that's why you called Donald Trump the least psychedelic person possible. It's kind of anathema to our politics right now. We're living in a country, let's just say it, it's a difficult time. We Americans are having a hard time talking to one another. We're starting to think of our neighbors as our adversaries. How did that happen? And I think that there's something going on in this movie and in this movement that Marcus and Amber are heading up that's kind of reminding us that there's more important things in life than those differences.
Yeah, and Marcus, thank you, Jon. And that also connects to your previous work, yours and Bonnie's previous work, which is a lot about how everything is interconnected, politics, environment, and things like that. Marcus, I think it was you in the movie who said after the Ibogaine, I could feel a connection to everything.
That was Maddie.
It was Maddie.
Yeah. But however, I also felt a connection to everything, so I just didn't say it. Well, this is, psychedelics are often called a non-specific amplifier, meaning that they don't really change you. They kind of make you more of the person you already are. And if you have an obsession, you become more obsessed with it. But the one consistent substantive insight that you hear is this sense of connection that, I realize that everything is related to everything else. That comes through in the movie. Could you, VETS, all capital letters, is the 501c3 that you and Amber, your wife, Amber Capone, run that helps fund vets to get Ibogaine treatment. People can find that online. And then could you just very quickly talk about Tara Mind, which is a for-profit company that is working in the psychedelic therapy-assisted space? Yeah. Well, first off, thank you so much for just plugging vets, showing the work that Amber and I have been so passionate about, and even with my commercial business, Tara Mind. So thank you. Tara Mind is really just an extension, I would say, of vets. The success we've had with vets into now really like a multinational 501c3, we have success there. And I was approached by investors that just said, what you're doing for veterans, like this, psychedelics are the future of mental health care, or at least a tool in mental health care that we need. And everybody needs it. This is a much larger issue, as we've been talking about here, than veterans, like much larger. Yep. And Tara Mind is taking what we did for veterans really to the employee benefit space. So, and here's why. Half of America is subsidized by their employer. So 140 million Americans get their health care through their employer. So what we're doing is we're taking alternative treatments and taking them to employers and asking employers to cover these treatments for their employees, because right now they're not covered. And you say, well, psychedelics are still Schedule 1. They are. So right now we're utilizing what we have access to, which is IV ketamine for treatment-resistant mental health care. We all know it's safe, it's effective, it's been around for a long time. Just insurance companies aren't covering it. So that's what we're doing. So we've built this massive network in all 50 states. We have providers, we have psychiatrists, integrative clinics, we have therapists in all 50 states. We package that together with a really advanced kind of AI-guided technology platform that connects the psychiatrist and the patient. coordinates care, and employers buy that and they sell it to, and we sell that to employers to offer these treatments up to their employees. That's
I got to, it's ironic that ketamine is now being used to help, everyday life, given that it was was developed as a battlefield anesthetic. So there's something psychedelic in that kind of circular nature. I will also, and I'll probably get in trouble for this, I suspect that Reason, which is published by a 501c3, but maybe we should be adding psychedelics to our healthcare benefits package. I'll ask our CFO about whether or not that's possible. But I want to thank Marcus Capone and Jon Shenk, for talking to Reason today. And, please watch In Waves and War, directed by Jon and Bonni Cohen and featuring Marcus and Amber Capone. Thanks, guys, so much for sharing your time today.
Thank you.